If your company missed holding an annual shareholders meeting and it's now ready to schedule a new meeting, it needs to get information to shareholders about relevant deadlines, dates, and the location of the new meeting. Form 8K is the vehicle to do that. Today on Zippy Point. I'm Brock Romanek, and I'm a big fan of yous. Item 5.08 of Form 8K originally was born out of the SEC's 2010 proxy access rulemaking. Some of proxy access went away when a court decision vacated Rule 14A11 in 2011. However, Item 5.08 of Form 8K as well as Schedule 14N are still alive. There's been a handful of Schedule 14Ns filed since that 2011 court date. A Schedule 14N must be filed by any shareholder from outside the company who nominates a director using the proxy access process. Over the last few years, hundreds of companies have adopted proxy access bylaws under pressure from institutional investors, including New York City's Office of Comptroller's Boardroom Accountability Project, as many companies received shareholder proposals on this topic as part of the private ordering of proxy access. Here's an example of a Schedule 14N filed. I think there's only been 2 or 3 filed in the last 5 years. Anyway, the title of Item 5.08 of Form 8K is a bit of a misnomer, shareholder director nominations, because the Form 8Ks filed under this item typically are used to fill in the gaps when a company missed holding an annual meeting and thus didn't file a proxy statement with the SEC for a period of time. In other words, when the company misses an annual meeting or moves the date at least a month away, an 8K under this item gives shareholders what they need to know about the next annual meeting. Companies typically go beyond the contours of Item 508 to address other matters than shareholder director nominations. That's what I'm getting at. The reality is that shareholders rarely submit a candidate to be considered as a director nominee on Schedule 14N. It's very rarely done because it's not a promising prospect. From the few examples that there have been over the years, nothing much has come out of it. So let me explain this Item 5.08 process again in perhaps what is a more organized way. For shareholder proposals under Rule 14A8E, if you are submitting a shareholder proposal for a company's next annual meeting, you typically find the submission deadline listed in last year's proxy statement. But if the company didn't have a proxy last year, where do you find that deadline? It would be in one of these Item 5.08 8Ks. Similarly, Rule 14A4C1 provides a deadline for shareholder nominations if the company discloses the deadline in its proxy statement. Again, if there's no proxy during the prior year, Item 5.08 8Ks fill that gap. They provide a safety valve, requiring that if the company held no annual meeting last year, or if the meeting was moved with 30 days in either direction from the prior year's meeting, the company must disclose the deadline for shareholder nominations on Form 8K within a reasonable time before the company mails its proxy. The 8K must be filed within 4 business days after the company determines the anticipated meeting date. Hopefully that meets the reasonable time standard that's in Item 5.08. The SEC hasn't provided gloss on what that term means, but I imagine companies would pick their meeting date a reasonable length of time before the meeting is actually held. You would think that only a handful of 8Ks have been filed under Item 5.08, but I easily found a number of examples. I guess more companies miss their annual meeting than I would have thought, and that was before COVID-19 blasted us. This item has been far more popular over the past year as many companies had to move their annual meeting due to the pandemic. Here's an example that sets the Rule 14A8 submission deadline, the director nomination deadline, the record date, and the date and location of the annual meeting. I found a number of examples like this. And then this example uses Item 5.08 8K as a way to announce when a tentative date for its annual meeting is set, but it doesn't know for sure whether that's truly the date, nor any of the deadlines, record date, or other details. The date of the triggering event for filing is the date on which the company selects its new annual meeting date or knows something. That's the date you use on the cover of the 8K as the date of event. And these 8Ks typically don't have any exhibits. I haven't seen any. Thank you, Detroit. Good night, Detroit. Huzzah.